Joining us now via telephone from Washington, D.C., Representative Walter B. Jones. Walter, welcome to America's Forum. Now, you suffered through a deluge of ads. Has it been quantified how much money did establishment groups spend against you in this primary campaign?
JD, right, and thank you again for the opportunity. You're a great friend of mine, and I really appreciate the chance to talk to you and to listen to you. $1.3 to $1.4 million is what they have spent, and our campaign, you know me, JD, I'm not a great fundraiser. I don't like calling for money, and we spent about $125,000, and so they outspent us 10 to 1.
Wow. Well, my last race, I was outspent 10 to 1, and I didn't pull it off, I'll tell you that. Walter, in the final analysis, what kept you there? Is it the dynamic of the inherent distrust with Washington, or what worked in your favor in this hard-fought primary?
Well, JD, first of all, I've got a great constituent staff in Greenville, North Carolina, and also in Washington, D.C., and my independence and willing to vote my conscience, I want to believe, helped me a great deal, the staff as well as voting my conscience. And people got sick and tired of these ads. You played one of them, and it's so unfair. Actually, Steve Cohen, and I think you know him, if not, because he was not here when we first got here, but Steve Cohen is a Democrat and he's Jewish. He came to me last Thursday and said, Walter, I am offended by what they're saying about you. Can I write a letter to your district and tell them that I, Steve Cohen, am Jewish and that I know you do support Israel? I said, Steve, if we had talked 4 weeks ago, I'd say yes, but we're only about 5 or 6 days from Election Day, and I don't think it will have the meaning it should. These groups have come out to me, JD, because like you, I'm a social conservative. I believe in protecting the unborn. I believe that marriage between man and woman has been sanctified by God in the words of the Bible. And this group that came, two groups that came against me, has spent almost $12 million several years ago to fight the marriage amendment in California.
Walter B. Jones, as we take a look at this dynamic, and we both know politics ain't beanbag, it's inherently based on conflict. It can be a contact sport. But when you take a look at who the establishment drafted to run against you, and we don't need to replay the campaign, but you know, I take a look at your background, and there are others who are given the moniker of maverick. But obviously, you have a different take on some foreign policy decisions. You're a border hawk. You mentioned you're a social conservative. Tell us what's going on in Washington in terms of this alliance between the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and organized labor, and apparently our congressional leadership on one hand, and the Obama administration to move toward what they call, quote, comprehensive immigration reform, what you and I call amnesty. Walter, right. What do you see? Is this another reason why they came after you with such ferocity and such expenditures in yesterday's primary?
JD, yes, it is part of the plan by the more liberal element of the Republican Party, and that includes the leadership that they want to be, those of us who have a conservative view, whether it be illegal immigration or conservative view on social issues. They do not, I mean, Ron Paul's a prime example, and I know he's a libertarian, but they have had their sights set on us ever since I came out. I did not vote for John Boehner to be Speaker of the House. I voted for David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the GAO, and I can tell you it's one thing after another. I don't walk lockstep with the leadership, whether it be on the immigration issues or this absolute waste of money in Afghanistan.
Walter B. Jones, what is your future? Will you remain a member of the Republican conference despite your disagreements with leadership? We should point out for the historical record, your father served many years in a seat in Congress as a conservative Democrat. Do you ever envision taking an independent stance in the Congress, or will you remain part of the Republican conference?
Well, JD, I'm going to watch this. We have a November election. We have a Democrat, and I'm not taking that lightly in eastern North Carolina. I think we'll be okay, but we've got to still work hard. And I'm going to wait to see what I hope there's going to be a movement within the Republican Party to change the leadership of the House. I'm going to make my decisions as I watch, and hopefully would be part of that if it and should it develop over the next couple of months.
Well, now let's talk about a change in leadership. As the Constitution points out, a speaker does not have to be a member of Congress. The Constitution simply says the House shall choose its speaker. You talked about voting for the comptroller last time. Obviously, you're not going to support John Boehner. Are you prepared to tell us, if you return to the Congress in January, who you would like to see in leadership as the next Speaker of the House?
Well, I think there are two or three within the Republican Party that, in my opinion, could take us in a different direction. I don't want to plant anybody's name for this reason. Then somebody will say that there's a movement, and there's not any movement. And maybe as we get into July, August, if you'd like for me to call back, maybe at that point I could mention two or three names to you.
Hey, Walter, when you're ready to make news, pal, we're happy to have you on. So you just let me know and let me know about that. You're sure you don't want to give us a little preview on those names right now?
Well, I haven't spoken to the individuals, and I would rather not. But I have talked. I'm going to be talking now that I've won. JD, I knew I was going to be in for a tough election just because of the money that was coming in. But I decided I would wait to see if I won. If I did win, which we did, I was going to start seeking out two or three of my friends over the next couple of weeks and just ask them, are you ready to make a move on the leadership? Because they do not represent what I consider the strength of the party. The strength of the party are conservative, libertarian-thinking people.
Well, Walter, here's the dynamic. You mentioned the fact you're still not out of the woods. There's a general election, and there was a sizable minority that went for your establishment-backed opponent. Are you going to be able to reconcile more moderate Republicans? Are they going to come back and vote for you this November?
JD, with my independence, you know your dear friend and my chief of staff, Glenn Downs, has always said this about Walter Jones. I never know how he's going to vote on the issue. He will either be a conservative, he'll be a centrist, or libertarian. And that's pretty much the way I'm perceived here in Washington, good or bad. And I will just say this, that I was very fortunate that 51% of the people of eastern North Carolina did not believe $1.3 million worth of anti-ads and distortions.
Well, when you mentioned again, and as a guy who's been in the trenches and been outspent 10-1, the fact that you were able to withstand that barrage is certainly very, very impressive. Now, in terms of the Republican reconciliation, you have it there in your district where it needs to happen. North Carolina, a lot of people were pointing to the Tar Heel state back in 2012 saying that North Carolina was the picture-perfect example of moving ahead together, getting things done. You got back in the Republican column in terms of the presidential race, picked up the governorship again. Is that same impulse toward getting everybody together, is it going to be at work again in 2014 now that the primary is over?
Well, my thinking is yes. We had a young man who's a doctor, Brannon, and a minister of the Baptist who moved the marriage amendment in North Carolina, Mr. Harris. And my thinking is yes, but we're not there yet. There's still some feelings that people want to know that Tom Tillis is the Speaker of the House, and I think he's going to have to reach out to the Tea Party types, and I think he's going to have to reach out to the Libertarian types and show them who he is, because he tied himself into Karl Rove to raise a lot of money.
Speaking of Karl Rove, in your opinion, does he do more harm than good for the Republican Party?
Well, for the social conservatives, I think he's done more to harm, because he is, again, reaching out to see a new movement with the chicken hawks like Bill Kristol and Jeb Bush maybe, and people like that. And I think if you don't make room for a Rand Paul, a Ted Cruz, a Michelle Bachmann, then in my mistake, you're not growing the party. They've got to feel just as much part of the Republican Party as those I just named.
Well, Walter Jones, we'll have to leave it there, my friend. We're out of time.
Okay.
We look forward to having you back, and we will discuss these issues, but obviously there's a way to go in terms of reconciliation. Where is your take on this question of reconciliation within the Republican Party between the establishment and the grassroots? Why don't you comment via Twitter at Newsmax TV, #AmericasForum. We are coming back with more of our program next.